Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really significant issue, sparking a lot of debate right now, mandatory paternity testing at birth.
Mm,
And you're here to get the core understanding fast, right, without wading through endless news cycles.
yeah.
And that's exactly what we're setting out to do. A shortcut, sort of.
So we'll be focusing on the arguments presented in this specific YouTube video. It's called Modern Women Are Doomed by this new anti-paternity fraud law approval from the Darius M channel.
Okay.
And it gives a look at the different viewpoints, discussions, personal stories even around mandatory DNA testing right after birth,
Yeah.
and also this idea of paternity fraud.
Right. So our goal, our mission here is to really dig into the key reasons being put forward, both for and against this kind of mandatory testing.
All based on what's in this video, yeah.
Exactly. We want to understand the context, what's driving these discussions, and maybe touch on the potential wider effects.
Sounds good.
And let's kick things off with something concrete, a specific recent event. Tennessee's House Bill 2689.
Yeah, that's a really crucial starting point, isn't it? This bill, which the video flags, now actually requires paternity tests before a birth certificate can be legally signed in Tennessee.
Wow.
So it throws us right into the thick of this whole complex issue.
Okay, let's unpack the central arguments then. The ones in favor of mandatory paternity testing, as laid out in this video, what's the core of that position?
Well, the video really emphasizes accuracy right from the start.
Accuracy. Okay.
It brings up stats suggesting, a pretty noticeable portion of men who take paternity tests. One figure cited is around 1/3 find out they aren't the biological father.
1/3. That's a pretty striking number, honestly.
It is. And when you hear a figure like that, it definitely makes you pause and think about, well, how paternity is currently established.
Yeah, absolutely. So the argument flowing from that is that mandatory testing could significantly cut down on these cases where the wrong father is identified.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the video takes it a step further, introducing this term paternity fraud.
Right.
The argument presented there is that mandatory testing could act as a deterrent, and the phrase used is basically take the profit out of paternity fraud.
Take the profit out. So the idea is some people might intentionally misidentify the father, maybe for financial gain or other reasons.
That seems to be the underlying suggestion, yeah. That it could prevent situations where paternity is, let's say, misrepresented.
And the video actually quotes someone directly backing this up, doesn't it? Something like.
Yeah, it says automatic DNA testing at birth would work to help two things. One, we would assure that the right parents were named on the birth certificate. Two, it would stop paternity fraud.
That's very direct. A clear statement of what the proponents are aiming for.
It is. And to kind of bolster this point, the video also pulls in data from the American Association of Blood Banks.
Okay, what did that show?
It indicates that between 25 and 30% of the males who are accused of being the father, they take a paternity test and find out they did not do it.
25 to 30%. So a slightly different range than the 1/3, but still.
Still points to a significant number of potential cases, yeah. Misattributed paternity.
What do you think causes that range difference? Maybe just different studies or...
Could be. Different populations studied, maybe the context of the testing, so if it's already contested. It does show there isn't just one single agreed-upon number floating around.
Yeah, fair point. But okay, beyond just getting it right at the start, the video also mentions this idea of preventing future legal fights, framing mandatory testing as a proactive solution. How's that supposed to work?
Well, the argument goes that if you establish legal paternity definitively with DNA right at birth, you could potentially head off those really contentious, emotionally draining legal battles down the road where a man might challenge paternity years later.
I see. So it's about creating more legal certainty up front for everyone involved, the child, the mother, the father.
That seems to be the goal. Yeah, more certainty, less conflict later on.
Okay. Now let's switch gears. Flip the coin. The video definitely makes it clear there's significant concern, even opposition, to this whole mandatory testing idea. Oh, absolutely. What are the main arguments against it that the video brings up?
Well, a really key concern highlighted comes from the video mentions so many women's groups.
Okay.
And their feeling is that mandatory testing is, quote, not fair.
Yeah.
And that it implies this sort of fundamental lack of trust in mothers.
Ah, the trust issue. Yeah, that seems central.
It really brings the potential the emotional impact of a policy like this right to the surface, doesn't it?
It does, but then, interestingly, the video presents a counter-argument to that specific point, saying that focusing on the lack of trust in the mother is maybe missing the point, calling it a red herring.
Yeah, what's the logic behind that rebuttal?
Well, the counterargument, as it's shown, kind of shifts the focus away from personal trust towards information.
Information. How so?
It points out that typically the mother is the one who has all of the information about potential fathers or the paternity candidates,
Right.
and that as things stand, there isn't always a legal duty to disclose that information fully.
I see. So the argument becomes less about we don't trust you and more about let's ensure factual accuracy for this legal document when maybe not all the facts are on the table.
Exactly. That's the reframing. It shifts it from an interpersonal trust issue to perhaps a procedural or informational accuracy issue for legal records.
Mhm.
What do you make of that perspective shift?
It's definitely a different angle. It tries to depersonalize it a bit, maybe, but, the personal element is still huge.
Oh, for sure. And the video touches on that too, with that anecdote about women saying they'd divorce their husband immediately if he asked them for a paternity test.
Wow. Yeah,
That reaction alone just highlights how incredibly sensitive this is within relationships.
absolutely. It shows how deeply embedded some assumptions about paternity are and how questioning them, even asking for a test, can feel like a massive breach of trust within a marriage.
Yeah. It makes you wonder about the effect mandatory testing might have on relationship dynamics right from day one.
Definitely. Starting a family under that kind of, well, mandated scrutiny.
So the video doesn't just stick to the legal points or the stats. It uses some really powerful personal stories, examples.
It does, and those really drive the points home.
Let's talk about some of those because I think they really show the human side of this whole debate. There's that really intense scene early on outside a house.
Yeah, that one grabs you immediately. It's just raw.
Yeah.
A very emotional confrontation where paternity is obviously the core issue. And the fact that it's being filmed, that adds another layer. It speaks volumes about the distrust and the tension in that situation. You can almost feel it.
And then there was the story about the hospital interaction.
Yeah.
Right after the baby's born, the man questions if he's the father.
Ugh, yeah. That anecdote really highlights the immediate emotional fallout. Questioning paternity at such a vulnerable, critical moment.
Yeah.
The woman's reaction, described in the video, just underscores the potential pain, the humiliation, maybe, of having your fidelity doubted right then and there.
It really makes you think about the emotional cost for everyone involved in a moment like that.
Def-
But maybe one of the most impactful parts was that courtroom excerpt, the one about the 11-month-old Lila Drew. Can you remind us what happened there?
Right. So in that clip, the court explicitly tells the man, you are not the father. It's legally determined.
Okay, clear cut.
You'd think.
Right.
But the woman insists he is. She even brings up specific intimate details, like a tattoo, their time together.
Wow.
But the court basically points out, look, even with that intimacy, there was still time, a window where another partner could have been involved.
So it just underscores how complex determining biological fatherhood can be, even with personal testimony. Assumptions aren't always reality.
Exactly. It shows the limits of relying just on memory or belief sometimes.
And it was right around that case in the video that they dropped another pretty big statistic, the one about men raising kids who aren't theirs unknowingly.
Yeah, that was a striking one. From 5 to 30% of the general population, men are raising and paying for children that are not theirs and don't know.
5 to 30%, that's a huge range.
It's massive. But even if you take the low end, 5%, across a whole population, that's still a very large number of individuals.
Absolutely. What does a stat like that, even with the wide range, suggest about how widespread this issue might be?
Well, even at 5%, it suggests that unknowingly misattributed paternity might be, well, more common than many people assume. And that points to potentially significant emotional fallout, financial burdens for the men involved, obviously,
Yeah.
and really complex situations for the kids and the mothers, too, down the line.
Yeah, it ripples outwards. There was also that other anecdote, the conversation about the ex-boyfriend.
Oh, right. The one who said even if he got married, he'd still want a DNA test if his partner had a child from a previous relationship. Or, wait, no, if they had a child together.
Yeah, if they had a child together, he'd want proof. And that sparked a big argument about trust, didn't it?
It did. And about the fundamental difference maybe between how motherhood and fatherhood are experienced or perceived. The certainty versus potential uncertainty.
Right. The woman in that scenario saw the request purely as a breach of trust. Total lack of faith.
Well, the man framed it as, like, a need for biological certainty. Something he can't know inherently the way a mother does carrying the child.
It really drills down into those differing perspectives and maybe even societal expectations around parenthood for moms versus dads. Is certainty assumed for one and not the other?
That's a really good question it raises, yeah.
And we shouldn't forget the personal moment from the speaker in the video itself. They seemed genuinely emotional after getting their own DNA test results.
Yeah, that vulnerability, that raw emotion. It serves as such a powerful reminder.
That these aren't just abstract legal debates or cold statistics.
Exactly. They have profound, deep, lasting personal consequences for real people. It makes all the arguments feel much less theoretical, much more human.
Definitely. Now, the video also briefly mentioned something related, maternity fraud. What was the point there?
Just a quick mention, really, that alongside this push for mandatory paternity tests, Tennessee is also apparently cracking down on maternity fraud, making it a punishable crime.
So ensuring accuracy on birth records from both sides, potentially?
That seems to be the implication. A broader legislative effort may be aimed at the accuracy of parentage information generally. What are your thoughts on linking those two?
It suggests, like you said, maybe a move towards greater scrutiny overall when establishing legal parentage. Accuracy and accountability, regardless of which parent. And it's probably a good moment to reiterate, like we always do, that we're just examining the content here, what's in this video.
Right. We're not taking a side or endorsing any specific viewpoint on mandatory testing itself.
Nope. Just trying to understand the arguments, the perspectives, the values presented in this particular source material for you.
Exactly. Our job is to give you that clear overview, the different facets of this ongoing debate as seen through the lens of this YouTube video.
So, okay, as we kind of start to wrap this up, we've definitely seen this core tension emerge from the source material, haven't we?
For sure.
This desire for biological certainty, for reducing cases where men unknowingly raise children who aren't biologically theirs.
Set against these really significant concerns about trust in relationships, about fairness, about what it means for society if we mandate genetic testing right at birth.
And we've looked at some pretty compelling stats, even with their ranges, and some deeply personal stories from the video that really paint a picture of the emotional reality.
Yeah, from the potential scale of misattributed paternity
Yeah.
to just the raw emotions that come up when these basic questions of who is the parent are asked. Those anecdotes especially make it all feel very tangible.
Right. So here's maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Thinking about everything we've unpacked from this video, what are the wider societal implications? If mandatory paternity testing became widespread, would it fundamentally change how we view parenthood, family relationships, the definition of family itself?
And what about unintended consequences? You know, collecting all this genetic information right at birth on such a massive scale, what could that lead to?
Yeah. Definitely some big questions to keep mulling over long after this deep dive is finished.